You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Packing up my bag at the moment, getting ready to leave on Wednesday. So we're doing an early record this week, right? So 5 days from now, right? Yeah, 5 days.
Oh, okay. So you got a while. Have you been to Singapore before?
I've not been to Singapore before, first time. So
what about Southeast Asia, just in general?
Yeah, I've been to Southeast Asia a bit. Yeah, Vietnam, and then through different parts. But yeah, I mean, Vietnam's my favorite place I've been to so far. So, but it's gonna be good to go to Singapore, and I've been to Hong Kong and stuff before. So yeah.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, I can swing by on the next one. It was just going to be a little bit too hard to go to Asia before Europe for 6 weeks. It's a little bit harder for me. I'm from Australia. It's just kind of on the way.
I'll trade you. Go to Europe if you like.
We'll see. Anyway, so episode 71 today, we're talking about, Hayden, what would you call this? Is this etiquette in Flesh and Blood? Table manners? What's the term?
I said etiquette and best practice because I think it's a bit of a mix. There's a bit of etiquette, but there's also some things on, there's from a quality of the gameplay perspective that we're going to talk about, but also just some things that you should do at big events, things that you should be mindful of, and things that you should also be watching for on both sides of the table.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of sportsmanship also kind of bleeds over as well. Obviously, that's not required to play a successful game of Flesh and Blood, but I think it is borderline required to have a long and good career doing so. Anyway, let's talk about your week in Flesh and Blood, Hayden. I know it's been testing. You're about to go play the calling. Do you want to give us any kind of tips, hints? What are you expecting for this Singapore calling?
Yeah, it's been a crazy week. It's probably been my busiest week I've ever had for my work life as well, which is just not good timing. Just with leaving on Wednesday, have a lot of things to finish up. Plus, it's just a very busy time of the year as well. So, not as much Flesh and Blood testing as I would like, ideally. I feel okay. I feel like I'm not feeling as good as I was last week. Last week, I was feeling particularly good about probably being close to locking in a deck. I just feel like testing this week has been, discovering a lot of new things, trying a lot of different things, just understanding where this meta sits at. And it's a very... I don't know. It's not a complicated meta. It's just quite open. There's just a lot of things to take into consideration. And the hardest thing going into Singapore this week, like you just asked, is understanding what the meta game might look like. So, I mean, I'm expecting to see a reasonable amount of aggressive decks, a reasonable amount of sort of Guardian and Ice decks to combat that, and then Prism will always show up. So I do feel like this weekend is going to be quite rock paper scissory, to be honest, heading into Singapore. Whether that translates over to the PT, I'm not sure yet.
Yes, so rock, paper, scissors is how I would define the meta right now. I do think it is particularly hard to pick a deck because of those, pretty much every top contending deck has a really bad matchup that's likely to show up in force. So, and it's really tough to actually bring your deck for the Pro Tour if you're leaving for Europe a bit early or just want to, maybe lock in a deck, because I think that the results of the Battle Hardened in Portland, but most importantly, the calling in Singapore, like drastically affects what deck you should maybe be bringing to the Pro Tour. So I'll just bring you into my mind a little bit.
I was just going to say, let's just timestamp this quickly, because I don't want people to be listening to this basically almost 5-6 days from when we're recording this, being like, What are these guys talking about? This is 8:36 a.m. Saturday morning in Australia, it must be about 5:30 for you in Texas, is that right?
Yeah,
on Friday evening.
Correct. Yeah, on Friday. Yeah, I forgot that we were recording so early, but
very early this week because I'm leaving. I won't be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the top 8 of Singapore, I think could really sway just like the sort of macro breakdown of what decks show up to the Pro Tour and like what you're likely to face in Swiss. Like if we see a Singapore where there's 5 Fi in top 8 and a Fi win, like I would expect like levels of Fi at the tournament close to like Lightning Briar back at US Nationals, like very, very high. If we see kind of a diverse top 8, we have the Guardians, we have a Prism in there, we have Fi, maybe like a Briar and a Viscerai as well. Kind of full steam ahead
status
with this.
Quo?
Yeah, status quo, but like then it's like rock, paper, scissors, and I think you just pick your favorite one, right? And because there is going to, depending how the top 8 goes, like yes, if it's overwhelmingly, if it's like Guardians, if it's Fis, if it's even Prisms, like I think that you could take that data and potentially change the deck you're going to play and change your strategy if it is a diverse top 8 and we do kind of move forward as status quo right now. And like, this is how I feel about a lot of the decks in the meta. I think it's kind of take your pick between like 3, maybe 4 decks, that have, they're attacking a specific thing, and then they do have like a boogeyman in the format as well that is a bad matchup. So I think you have a lot of choice depending on how the data comes in. I think that I will be using Singapore to sort of, oh God, hopefully I don't have to switch again. I mean, you said it earlier, you felt better last week. I think that's kind of been, that's a takeaway from the testing process this time. Also, it's been influenced by the ban, of course, but it's been hard to lock in a deck. We've been really, really trying to lock in a deck, and it's just not happening.
Nowhere near. To be honest, I've probably taken 5 full decks with me on my trip. I think I'm probably selecting from about 3 or 4 different heroes at the stage, which is is crazy to think. Definitely wasn't even feeling that way for the last PT. The other thing as well is you talk about what might happen with this meta and where it shakes out. I think, players are going to end up on comfort picks, I think, because it makes sense. We talked about this at PT1, like comfort picks being reasonable picks. We saw people comfort pick to Prism, to Lexi, maybe just to Chain instead of playing Bravo, or just sticking to Bravo start of the show. And I think, it all made sense, but that was a really like a 2-deck format, I think, in terms of what was dominating in that meta. This is very different. So I think comfort picks are even more viable this time around. And what it's really going to be is, first of all, there will be someone, I feel this way, there will be at least a group or 2 that find a deck that, sits in a position where it's going to match up well. Maybe it has one bad matchup, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's the 4th or 5th most played deck, and they're really rolling. But for others, it's going to be about which of the 3 decks, maybe the 3 top heroes, are you wanting to sacrifice to, or the slice of the pie when you talk about that rock paper scissors of aggro, control, and whatever Prism is.
Yeah, they could even like a group of players could even find like a card or a game plan, right? Because for a lot of it, it's like you can like a lot of these decks they're quite good into everything, and then they just have like one like really bad matchup, or maybe a series, but really only one of those decks is going to be represented the Pro Tour. Like if you find a game plan that brings that closer to 50-50, or a card that helps you out in that specific bad matchup, I think that's the deck, right? Like, that's kind of the goal right now.
So we're trying to find.
Yep, exactly. Like, it's not going to be, I don't think it's not going to be another Kano, right? Like, we're not going to show up with Levia, with Talishar, and like randomly have this combo deck. It's like, we're just trying to find specific cards, specific gameplay to shore up the bad matchups enough to where we can have like a more reasonable deck, if Gem doesn't go our way.
Yeah, I mean I agree. It's like, what do you pick a deck that's like 55 and 80, 55% into 80% of its matchups, or do you pick a deck that's like on average around 60 to 70 and 70% of the matchups? It's a 60 to 70% of the matchups. It's a real tough one to call, and you've got to make the call, and then maybe you can find some sideboard plans, some game plans that give you some edge. Maybe, you have this natural deck that is a predator into half the field, and you just have to build a sideboard for 25%, and you can get it to close to a flip, and the other 25% you just have to hope to start well, or go and have an early lunch. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting. Of course, draft in this format as well, so that makes picks even more complicated. So it's great. Anyway, great conversation. Not part of our plan, but I think really good to talk about where we are right now as we head into myself, Singapore, and then of course, 9 days from the time of this pod dropping, we'll be at the PT playing. So very exciting times. News, Brendan. Should we jump straight in? The big one on the news this week that we want to cover is World's announcement. So we have an official announcement as we record, kind of old news by the time the pod drops, unfortunately, so we won't spend too much time on it. I know the kind of discourse on Twitter is blowing up. So and Facebook, whatever, Discord, you can see these kind of conversations. But, if you're not necessarily ingrained in these communities, you might not be seeing it. So we'll have a little bit of chat about that. But first of all, World's announcement. So, of course, we already knew the dates for the World Championship. We knew it was happening in San Jose in California. Now we do know that we've got details on format. So it's Thursday, 3rd of November till Sunday, 6th of November at the San Jose Convention Center. Thursday is going to be, I'm just going to go through what's happening for run sheet. So Thursday is a World Championship players like registration, and at 6 p.m. they have the thing they always do, which is kind of like LS's Q&A discussion panel plus the players reception. And often, I think they open it out to the public as well for a certain amount of spots once they've filled it up with the players who are already qualified for the event, because people might not show or might not come or whatever. And then Friday, of course, is the start of the World Championships. And we're going to start with, so this is 16 rounds of the World Championship. So the breakdown is rounds 1 to 3 are draft, rounds 4 to 8 are class constructed. So that's day 1, 8 rounds. Then you show up on Sunday. We've got another draft for rounds 9 to 11. And then, Brendan, as we head into the run of things, right into the thick of it, 5 rounds of Blitz, rounds 12 to 16. So we do have 3 full formats for the World Championships: Classic Constructed, Draft, Blitz. Draft being 6 rounds, and the Classic Constructed 5, Blitz 5. And then there is, of course, the calling on Saturday, which is, I think the calling is Classic Constructed. Just want to make sure I got that right. Yeah, Classic Constructed. And then there is also a Battle Hardened on the Sunday, which is Blitz. So you get those formats there. And pretty big prizes as well. They've announced the prize pool for the World Championships: $100,000 USD for US dollars for first. The champion prize card, which you know about, which you saw Pablo get the chain at PT1. Gold legendary, and PTI, and then that drops down. You can go see it all on fabtcg.com with the announcement. But it's a $300,000 prize pool for the World Championship alone. And then, of course, the calling. It is one of those bigger callings, I think, in terms of prize money. So I think it's about $7,000 for first. Anyway, you can go see all the full details there. There's ticket packages. You can see what's available. Really cool Sync Below mat is the mat for the World Championship for the San Jose calling and the associated events, which looks really, really cool. So full details, tickets, and everything is going up now, I think, at fabevents.gg. But anyway, Brendan, want to ask you, there's back to the discourse I said earlier, a lot of discussion, Discords, Twitters, Facebook pages, just in groups in general. Blitz is going to be at the World Championship, and both negative and positive reactions. Any kind of quick thoughts from yourself, or what you think about the discourse that's happening around this?
So I haven't seen any of it. I've just been a little bit off social media, but I'm going to assume that the negative discourse is in, regarding Blitz and the competitive integrity around that format. I am, usually some issues people would say I might fall into that boat of criticism, but I'm actually kind of on the other side where I think that
change, man.
Yeah, I think Blitz is, it gets a bad rap, right? I do think that it is less competitive, and you have less agency than you do in Classic Constructed, but I still think that it's a very legitimate format that you can play competitive events with, right? The World Championship? We'll see. So the thing is just where the Blitz rounds are.
I was honestly waiting for the bar.
The Blitz rounds, they fall in a pretty funny time, right? Like they fall right on that top 8 bubble, like where you're actually going to be competing to continue on in the tournament. But overall, I saw this and I didn't feel bad, to be honest. And I think a lot of people might have seen it and felt that way. I've played a lot of Blitz recently. I've played a lot of Blitz just in my Fab career in general. And I think that it's a decent format. You can have your problems with it, but overall, it's competitive. But
yeah,
I wasn't surprised. We've heard from James White many, many times that like this idea of the fully well-rounded player. We've seen that in the Pro Tours with these dual formats between Draft and Classic Constructed. So when we talk about fully well-rounded, Flesh and Blood World Champion, in congruency with that ethos, I am not surprised that they actually ended up including Blitz as well. And who knows? Maybe Blitz could be a fun and healthy format coming into Worlds.
I was surprised, personally, quite surprised that Blitz was going to be included. But I didn't have a negative reaction personally. I do understand though. I understand the negative reactions. One of the big ones and one of the big callouts, and I'm not sure if I've seen this that much, but I've definitely seen it from a couple of people. Probably would be my biggest gripe if I had an issue with it. Is that the Blitz format has continually through the messages of LSS been, you can even look on the Blitz format and the formats page. It's touted as the more casual of the formats, right? The more entry level, the way to access through armories, skirmish, and of course, there was questions when we had the calling, right? The team calling, but it was like, it's a team calling, it's a bit different. Of course, there was the Blitz calling, and Cookout was Blitz calling as well. So I think we've started to see it emerge into a bit more, and LSS maybe casting an eye across the Blitz format a bit more in terms of banner suspended lists and things like that. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but I don't think it doesn't make sense. I think it makes some sense. I think one thing on the round structure I did want to say is that thinking about it, I actually think it makes way more sense to have it where they've put it. So at first I was like, why would they put this at win and in spots? You feel you roll down your X1, X2, and then you just roll through three rounds where you feel like you get hit with the variance. But that can happen in all formats. And the other thing I wanted to say is that because of the way the tiebreakers work in Flesh and Blood with Gem, is that losing later rounds as opposed to earlier rounds are better. So you'd rather have that variance come at the end of the start, right? In terms of that. So I think it makes sense where it is. It might have some interesting things with coverage. I think blitzes can be a little bit tougher for coverage, I think, just because of the nature of the short games and how fast-paced things can be. But it'll be really interesting to see. It's less than a third of the Swiss, and then, of course, it's not top 8. It's class constructed top 8. So, yeah, and I think in terms of what you just talked about, the competitive integrity of the format, like we say, LSS have had an eye on it. We've seen, and also with big events, you could say, well, there's variance and stuff. Look at the top 8 and look at the top cuts of the Blitz events we've had so far. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can say teams average that out, but good players have won these events and done well at Blitz events. It's not like, it's just a crapshoot to show up and, I'm just KOing people and I won this event. It's not happening. Like there's 5 rounds of this. Yeah, it might happen 1 or 2 rounds, but yeah, anyway, I digress.
Yeah, if you look at the tournament breakdowns.
Yuan G won Krakow,
Yep, they're players that are, nobody's rolling out with KO and just randomly winning a blitz calling, or even the world championships. It's not going to happen. Despite what most of the community seems to think when it comes to blitz. It's like they just think like, oh, you just get lucky. Yeah. No,
yeah, some. There's voices on both sides, right? But my favorite one, and at risk of getting the flack from this for people, saying, tell me to shut up. But my favorite one I saw, it made me crack up. I had a little laugh. As I saw someone on Twitter say, you can't have it both ways. You can't complain about LSS members being involved in the blitz calling and then all topping the blitz calling and then complain about the variance of the format. Yeah. It's just, whether it's true or not, it just made me laugh.
For sure. Big money, though. Big money on the line. $300,000 prize pool.
That's true. It's a bit different to a team's calling with a lot.
No, I'm just saying that in like a good thing in terms of news is like there's a lot of money on the line.
Huge.
Yeah.
Very top heavy. So I just want to point that out. 100K for first place, which is awesome. That's a grail, right? That's amazing to see. 25K for the finalists, 16 and a half. So nothing to turn your nose up at. I guess in even 9th to 16th is 4,000, which is I think double what I was paid for my top 16. I think top 16 the PT one was 2.5. I think it's the same for PT2. So, it's a big increase, which is, top 64, $1,500. It's probably, if you're in continental US, going to cover your trip almost, right? So, although it's in California, so maybe
San
not.
Jose, I'm not sure, but yeah.
But, yeah. So, no, awesome to see. Battle Hard in Portland is happening. It's already happened by the time this pod's up, so we won't talk too much about it, but that's why we're not talking about it on this pod, because we haven't seen results yet. It has not happened yet at this point. Calling Charlotte and US Nationals info is up on fabtcg.com. That is happening on, I want to say 23rd to 25th September. Yeah, it is. So there is, of course, the US Nationals plus the calling. You can go and see all that, check, how to register and whatnot. Nationals coming out very, very quickly. And then lastly in the news, something exciting popped up on the page, on the Fab TCG, the mothership this week, Brendan, is that we're getting Dynasty info coming on August 30th. So my question to you, Brendan, is are we seeing a spoiler at the PT? Surely, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you'd think so. Would make sense from...
Q&A panel. Everyone's going to be waiting with bated breath to see the images of like the people snapping the PowerPoint and like trying to zoom in and...
Yeah, well, the good thing about the Q&A panel this time is that James isn't going to have to answer for his sins with Starvo this time, because...
He did last time.
I know, that's what I'm saying. He was put on blast last time. Now he gets to relax and talk about this cool new product that's coming out, and I'm like, why did you print this dumb hero?
Yeah, we can talk about Stubby Hammers.
Yeah, Stubby Hammers is fine.
So no, very exciting. Can't wait for... Do you know what? For some reason, Dynasty is maybe top 2 sets I've been most excited for. Just something about... Yeah, I don't know what it is. I feel like we're at this point in this game where we've had a lot of really cool stuff. Uprising was interesting, but now we're about to get... So this is a supplemental set, or whatever they're calling it now. Sorry, like it's not a core set. It's not a draft set. And I think this could... we've seen with... to be honest, I was quite disappointed with Everfest. I won't lie.
What?
Not been my favorite set.
You don't like potions? What the...
It's not even that. It's just like, I think just the aesthetic and the cards.
You got Crucible of War first. You got spoiled,
The Crucible War is nuts. So anyway, I'm excited that we might be somewhere at least between Everfest and Crucible War, and that even just that is enough to make it probably my top 3 sets so far, because Crucible is probably, if not my favorite set, it's probably my second favorite set behind Welcome to Wraith.
Supplemental sets are my favorite sets by far. I know we've talked about it a million times in the pod, but they can be so
because you're a constructed player.
What? I'm an everything player. But these things are so fun. Like if you look, if we got Crucible of War these days, like I mean, that was quite a set to unpack. I mean, I felt like we were still discovering things multiple sets later. So just awesome.
Yeah, just wait for the PT. Ooh. No, it's great. Lastly, Patreon call out. Thank you, big thank you to all of our patrons for supporting us. Everything you asked to do. If you do want to become a Patreon, or patron, or you are already a patron, that's where our monthly additional podcasts go up. That's where we throw up all of our deck guides when we do deck techs that go up on YouTube, plus any other additional content. We're going to be doing some stuff through the PT. Brendan, I don't know if we talked about this, but I've got a little camera we're taking along for a ride with the PT, so you get a little insight into our week before the PT. Brendan's going to be behind the
stressing out. We're all like, "What the fuck do we play?" The house is on fire.
You can see what Brendan's like behind when the webcam's shut off when he's just in his natural habitat. So you're gonna have to put a shirt on, by the way.
Yeah. Like you'll catch me like behind the scenes. I'm like, dude, this game is so awesome. I love when they just ban stuff late. It's so awesome. Just shake it up. No, I'm kidding.
But anyway, yeah. So that's all up on patreon.com/Arsenal Pass. Moving on. Commander Cookout time. We've had some amazing questions come through the Commander Cookout the last few weeks. I've actually had like a plethora to choose from. So I've been trying to vary them up a little bit, choose some different ones, get a little bit different insight. There's a lot of different kind of questions that have come through, which is super exciting in terms of, gameplay based, theory based, away from the table based, which is really cool. So this Commander question comes from, Commander and Cookout question comes from, I'm struggling with words today, Brendan, from Prodigy on Discord, on our Arsenal Pass Discord, which you can also get access to if you are a patron. And Prodigy says, do you think yellows might be underplayed in some decks where you wouldn't traditionally think of them? And if not now, could you imagine them rising in viability in the future, outside obvious Luminara style effects that specifically require them?
Yeah, yellows are really funny. Like that's
yes.
Yep, yellow. I mean, just like yellow pitch is a funny design in Flesh and Blood, and especially in Class Constructed.
Great design.
Yeah, it's just like it's a weird way in between like your resource card and your attack card. I actually thought it was kind of a missed opportunity when Icelander didn't utilize yellow cards. I know that the blue, kind of is the theme of ice and more resources, all of that. But like wizard yellows are effectively just I don't know. Coasters, right? Like they don't do anything. So Luminaris, that's one of my favorite things about Prism. It does utilize the yellow pitch, does get a payoff for it. I think that usually sometimes it feels like when we do see yellow pitch cards being played, it's when there's like a 9 of, or a specific reason. Like you think about Yellow Shrill Skullhorn, that card is particularly nice if you're playing a Blittle package because it reveals to Blittle and still gets the buff. And you're playing the blue as well. But Hayden, I'm going to let you go ahead and weigh in on your sort of ideas of yellow pitch, the sort of in-between design of a resource card and attack card.
Yeah. So the reason I picked this question is because I think it's actually something that I'm fascinated with, is the use of yellows in the game of Flesh and Blood. And it's the balance of pitch and power, right? That's literally what a yellow is. You're trading off. So with the blue, these are traditionally your resource cards. Reds are traditionally your power cards. The cards are going to win you the game. So what does a yellow do? Well, it trades off a point of damage here or a slight increase on the effect at red for the extra pitch, but it's still not a blue. So, often it's like, wow, the blue is good here, the red's good here, the yellow's kind of whatever. But one thing that I think gets overlooked is what yellows do for consistency, especially in a pitch base or a resource based deck, a deck that needs certain resources where yellows can fulfill that. So, obviously, the obvious examples like Prism, which Prodigy does allude to, but there is other decks that can use yellows in quite an efficient way. So, I think Briar is one that can do that. For instance, decks that have want to play 2/1 costs on a turn. They have a lot of 0 costs. What makes yellows difficult to play, in all honesty, is weapons, right? So, but where that can change, where you can change it up, is Brute. Brute can play yellows really well because of the structure of something like Romping Club. So I do think yellows are overlooked just in general in terms of what they can do in the balance of their pitch value. What I think can actually happen with yellows in the future, and I think we're going to see this with people looking at deck design, is because yellows can actually offset some of your variance. How bad does it feel when you draw an all red hand, and how much can that hand be fixed by just having one yellow in it? That can often happen, right, depending on the deck you're playing. So having yellows in the deck can offset these all red, all blue hands, right? They trade some power for pitch, and that can do something that increases consistency. It might lower your ceiling somewhat, but increase consistency in certain decks. So I think that's kind of the future of yellows, and I think that's the design space that LSs have always had in mind, is that yellows are this way to offset some of the variance, to offset, trade in that power for that efficiency, or trade in that resource for the efficiency. And I think that's something that is kind of underexplored, and there is opportunities already out there. And I think with deck designers, we're going to start to see it used a bit more. I am always surprised by how few decks, play yellows. There is good yellows. Like LSS specifically go out and print these really powerful yellow cards to incentivize people to put yellows in the deck to have this kind of offset at the variance. You just talked about, yellows are trash and wizard, they're coasters. But then you look at Sonic Boom, right? Cards like that, Lessons in Lava. Two of the most powerful cards in a Kano deck are yellows. And, yes, if they were red, they'd be even more powerful. And if they're blue, they'd be great resource cards. Exactly. So there's so many, Blood Rush Bell is yellow. I like that LSS have had this design philosophy of using yellows as kind of these power cards. But what I would love to see is like kind of that step down a little bit. Because you talked about 9-ofs, right? 9-ofs are a thing. But what about if we saw, 6-ofs or even like the best of that card being a yellow potentially? Like I would have loved to see Plunder run it rare, but only be yellow, for instance. Things like that. So I think there's a lot of design space they can explore.
Yeah, I could potentially not be smart enough. Actually, it's very likely, but I do have a sentiment that I feel like yellows have like kind of missed the mark a bit, just in terms of like being utilized. Maybe it's because of the power level of Flesh and Blood these days, but yeah, I find myself pretty hard pressed to play a yellow unless there's an overwhelming reason to outside of the actual pitch value of the card, such as the attack value, whether it's for brute and I want that 6 attack, or whether it's for a belittle package and I want it to be low enough attack so I can reveal it. Other than that, unless I'm forced to play yellows because it's like a majestic or something like Salt the Wound, haven't been doing it, right? And I have a hard time finding a compelling reason why, right? Like when we talk about sort of mitigating variance and things like that, like you talked about the 4 red hand, like, yeah, I could have a yellow in that hand, but pretty much every time I feel like I'd rather the yellow be a blue. So it's like, is the better answer always just to add more blues when you want to have a better curve per se?
Potentially.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a tough question. But yellows are very underused. Like that is a fact for sure.
Yeah, like you could use an example, right? And this isn't the best example, but it's one that I can kind of semi-equate. Is that you talk about a 9-of, right? Let's use Movrian Skies and Viscerai decks. 9-of, yeah. If you were really worried about that yellow underperforming, you could play, say, Blue Leather Charge, right? If you were looking for something that did a similar effect, but was that blue. So I think there is, as the game grows, you're going to see some, I do have concerns for yellows actually in the future in terms of just because redundancy comes in terms of with certain effects and stuff like that, and then the yellows become even less useful. But I think the design space we've already seen with, I do agree some miss the mark, but then some are really impactful and really important. So what probably comes down the road is like, how do we utilize and leverage those yellows? Like, what does that look like? Can you build a deck that wants to play the most powerful yellows in it, for instance, in any particular class, and then also utilize that as a kind of backbone to how you structure your deck?
Yeah. And slightly going outside of that box, I think that the game design of yellows is actually really, really good in limited. Like I really like them in limited. Like, like sometimes you go for the 1 for 4 at yellow rather than the 1 for 5, just because it's a better curve. And in limited, you're not having like these ultra efficient decks like you do in Classic Constructed, where it's like I literally want a red or I want a blue. Like sometimes the 1 for 4 is just enough, and you can go with that. Still, at the same time, maybe you would always want that yellow to be a red, but it is probably highly dependent on something like it's a weapon, a consistent thing you're pitching towards, and like how much that costs. But I do like the design space of yellows in limited. In Classic, they feel a bit ephemeral for me. Like they're hard to get my head around it. I'm just like, I'd rather have a red or I'd rather have a blue. But that's just how I feel.
I'll counter you a little bit though and say yellows and uprising are pretty trash. And uprising limited, but previous limited formats, I agree. Like Welcome to Wraith in particular, I think yellows have quite a high value. Tales of Aria, especially class yellows. So yeah, it's interesting. But uprising in particular, I think maybe that one missed the mark. I think yellows are significantly terrible. Anyway,
right.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for the question, Prodigy. Great question. I love these sort of questions about the sort of holistic space of the game and a bit more theory. So if you do want to get your questions in for the Commander Cookout, you can do so by dropping them down in the comments on YouTube below. You can email to us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. There's a channel on our Discord that you can drop them into, or you can just like DM us, tweet at us, whatever you want to do. Drop us a note at the Pro Tour. Anyway, Brendan, I'm going to pass over to you for the main topic of the show.
Yeah, so the main topic of the show, etiquette, table manners, sportsmanship, whatever you want to call it. Basically, a couple tips from Hayden and I on how you should consider behaving when you approach a Flesh and Blood event, when you get to the table, how do you treat your opponent, and some standard operating procedures that a lot of people might not know. I know when I came into card games, there's a lot of stuff going on pre-match, during match, and post-match that I had no freaking idea about. And, you know, Hayden and I have had a very close friend of ours learn a pretty stern lesson about getting to the table on time, per se. So a lot of stuff that goes into that.
Who is this?
Who could that be? Anyway, so let's talk about why first. This is going to be pretty quick, but why? So I think it's important if you want to have a good time in this game to curate a positive experience, no matter the level of event. So that's your armories, that's your callings, that's your pro tours. I think it's generally best practice to leave the table better than you found it, and so that is somewhat, you know, curating that experience with your opponents so that you both have a good time, even if it is at a high level event like a pro tour or like Worlds. The next is to insulate yourself from potential issues and miscommunication. If you've played Flesh and Blood, you've probably had this happen, right? Someone passed priority, they didn't know what's going on, something was done out of order, you couldn't see like the second card that was under the pitch card, all this stuff where, you know, I think that if you're clearly articulating your game state and presenting your cards, it's just better for everyone, including you, even from like an edge perspective. And lastly, I'm just leaving it up to you, Hayden. Why would you want to sort of have good table etiquette, table manners, and sportsmanship when playing Flesh and Blood?
I feel like I could write a thesis on this, to be honest. Like, I'm actually glad you brought this topic. This is all Brennan wanting to bring this topic. Actually, I had nothing to do with this, but I'm glad we are talking about it because I'd say my biggest one is that there's two players at the table. And I think as one half of the players at the table, is your responsibility to make sure that both players walk away having had a good experience. That, like, you can disagree with it and you can say, I'm not there to make someone feel better, I'm there to play a game. Cool. That's your opinion, that's your attitude. I think that's wrong. I think it's a terrible attitude to come to the game with, personally, if you're there to just purely win. But it is what it is, right? But I would say that really the crux of my why you should sort of have these kind of etiquette and table manners, sportsmanship, whatever you want to call it. We could have come up with a better name, Brennan, but that's all right. We'll leave that to Chase. Is that we, you know, like I say, you're one half of the match that's happening. So communication is super important. You know, the demeanor, the attitude is super important, I think. And the other piece is that you just want to be aware of things. You want to avoid having to have a judge come to the table because of miscommunication. You want to avoid having something happen that shouldn't happen because you just didn't know, weren't in the right frame of mind, didn't have the right conversation with your opponent. So even to the point, there's just like efficiencies that you can have. And every match you have is going to be different. Every opponent's going to be different around the way that they might interact with you. I also think it's important to understand, I guess, the whys, because everyone's going to be different. So if you can kind of have a few really basic things that you always follow, you can avoid some of these kind of awkward and just not very nice interactions. But yeah, so honestly, so many things. But I'm looking forward to just diving and talking about some of them.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into the how. So I want to start off with the logistics and standard procedure for pre-match, right? So I have a little bit of a pre-match ritual, and a lot of this I do, I actually don't really care what the outcome of me performing these actions are, but by doing them, it puts me in the zone and sort of clicks for me that, okay, I am aware of my surroundings. I'm aware of what's going on. I'm cognizant of the board, the cards, the person, the deck, everything, right? So what I'll do is when I show up, first of all, I'll show up on time. That's important. But I will take, I'll roll. Yeah, a lot of people don't roll their dice before they start sideboarding. So I roll before we start sideboarding. Even odd is always better than high roll. But never even odd 2 dice. That's what Tarek Patel says. No, I'm kidding. He's
always with 2 dice because it's better. And you can see the dice clanging together.
Tarek says they're not equal. No, I'm kidding. He's got a. It bothers him so much if you say that. So if you ever play against him, tell him that even 2 dice is not equal to 1. We're doing even odd. Anyway, so I roll before I sideboard. Then I start thinking about my sideboard. When my opponent presents their deck, I will count it. So I will count all the cards. I literally don't care, really. Obviously, if they have 59 cards or 61 cards, we will proceed with whatever the resolution is for that in the case of 59. But I'm not counting because I actually care. When I'm counting my cards, it's just a part of my pre-match ritual where I'm getting in the zone, right? I'm making sure I'm checking all my boxes, going down my list, and that's it, right? It becomes mechanical at that point, and it helps me sort of become present. So I'll do that. I'll present their deck. And this is of course after sideboarding. When I sideboard, I do count my deck after that to make sure there's 60. I can't tell you how many times I've had more cards than I wanted or been at like 59 cards or something silly like that. I will double check my sideboard. So I'll go in and look at the cards that are not in the deck, double check all the ones are there. Everything is correct. All that good stuff. Hayden, what does your sort of pre-match procedure look like?
Yeah, I wanted to actually just kind of like riff off of your ones because mine are quite different. I do things differently, so to speak. So I do agree with you. In terms of like sitting down at the table, I mean, my first thing is I just introduce myself, just say hello and meet who I'm playing. I think just going back to my first point, it's half your job as the player at the table to make it a good environment. So that's kind of my first job is just sit down and just say hello. And yeah, I mean, it might be different for each and every person. You might want to be in the zone and it's just, you just want to play your game and be there and that's cool. The next for me is, determining, who's going to go first and second. So rolling the dice, I will always odd even. I just immediately, do you want odd or even? Let's just roll it. Odd and even saves on rerolls, right? It's the easiest way to do it. If people are a little bit worried about odd even, they want a high roll. I get suspicious, to be honest.
That's crazy.
But, I that's probably the one thing I don't like is when people want the high roll because it just does make me a little bit suspicious. I've watched people roll dice and not roll dice properly. And so if they don't want to odd even with one dice, I'll offer odd and even with two dice so they can clearly see it, or I'll offer them to roll the odd even and I'll call it. Not interested in high roll, to be honest. The next thing, like you say, so sideboarding after that. So reveal hero, odd even, everyone knows procedures, decide who's going to go first, second. I'll get into my sideboarding. My sideboarding's been different for first, second. So I always make sure that we determine who's going first, second before I even touch my sideboard. Like you, I'm then sideboarding, making sure I've got the cards I want in my sideboard afterwards, away from the game. They're the cards I know that match my sideboard plan and that I've got 60 cards in my deck. To be honest, I don't actually count my deck. I just count my sideboard. I kind of trust that I haven't dropped cards, but I have done that before. So maybe I should start. I left behind an Electrify red at a table in where was the calling went to? In Florida. And the judges called me up to the front of the table. So luckily I got it back before the next round even started because I probably wouldn't have noticed and that could have been bad for me presenting a 59 card deck. Presentation of decks. I don't count my opponent's deck, to be honest. I'll ask them. I'll be like, if it's relevant to me, are you playing more than 60 cards? Maybe that's a trust thing, to be honest. I probably wouldn't recommend that to people. I would say if you are worried about what people are playing in the deck's amount of cards, I would just count their deck. Just be very careful about how you do it. But it can throw some people off. I just prefer not to do it. I will when I'm shuffling though, just like always I'll always shuffle my opponent's deck. I won't ever just cut. And I will just kind of like glance over the back of their sleeves and just like check because through no fault of the opponent's right, their sleeves might just not be in a good shape, and whether they intentionally do it or not, they could have some unintentionally marked sleeves that allow them to know what the cards are, even if they're not thinking about it. A slight bend on a sleeve here they saw last game that they remember could just be like, they know their cards on top of the deck. So to protect both players, I'll always just kind of check the sleeves as they go. I'm also checking my sleeves when I'm shuffling up as well to make sure I've got no split sleeves, no marked sleeves or anything like that to replace sleeves. I'd say I replace like a sleeve or two every kind of second round just through natural kind of like shuffling and marking, especially after sort of rounds 5 or 6, because that can happen. So yeah, that's kind of my pregame.
Yep. And that's a good point you talked about is your sleeves getting marked and you're replacing sleeves like that. So I remember when I first started playing, I had been using the same sleeves I've been using for God knows how many months. And this idea of marked sleeves is not even a thing for me. And yeah, I will go through multiple sleeves in an event. It just happens. And better for you to catch it rather than some judge to catch it when you're unaware. So I will. It's your
responsibility. Yeah, it's actually your responsibility. Like that is the be all and end all. Is whether you have done something intentionally, unintentionally. You can go look at the rules and policies for infractions. Is that it's actually your responsibility to make sure that you do have no unintentionally or intentionally marked sleeves. So at the end of the day, if you are playing with marked sleeves, be it unintentional, you could face quite a severe consequence of that. So it is something to be. And this is where the foiling discussion with cards is coming as well, because that can be considered marked cards. So, I also just am avoiding foils at this point, but also just being really careful about the uniformity of my deck and changing sleeves if need be. It's just not worth the risk. And it's your responsibility as the player. As one half of the table there, just make sure your deck's in good shape.
Yep. That is a slight deviation, but I do want to kind of just zone in on that point real quick because I do think it is very, very, very important if you're playing at a pro tour. I'm also completely avoiding foils. This means that I'm buying additional cards that I do not own and not foil because I don't think that you should take any chances right now. They have gotten rid of the disqualification that was very easy to get, and now it's a game loss, but a game loss at a pro tour because one of your foils is a little bit more pringled than the other one. Don't go for it. I think if you can afford to buy a non-foil, please do so because nobody has fun when that happens. Anyway,
I've always had that approach though. Like I've never played with foils. The kind of the foil fables kind of annoys me. And
you can
if I'm playing them. Yeah, you can. You can ask the head judge for a proxy.
Mm-hmm. And I recommend you do, by the way, because we've had a few of those. So this is backing up just a little bit. I guess it's pre-match, and that's just showing up on time. So it's very, very important to be punctual, to be at the table on time. If you are not, you will be punished accordingly. We had a friend, Mr. Dante Del Frisco, using the bathroom. Thought it'd be no big deal if he showed 10 to 15 seconds late. Got a nice stiff IP penalty off the back of that. Thing is, you just need to be aware. Listen to the comms. I know that sometimes the round duration can be kind of variable, right? Because it goes overtime because people are turns, or maybe it pretty much never ends early. But sometimes it can be a bit variable. I think that you should try to get whatever business you need to get done after the round done as quickly as possible if you have time. If not, get to your table. You can get to your table, then you can raise your hand, call a judge over, and then ask if you can use the restroom or something like that. And I will do that most of the time, to be honest, because I don't want to get caught with this IP penalty.
Something that I think people don't know is that you can take a comfort break if you need to during a match. You can if you need to step away from the table for any good reason. So you need to use the bathroom, you need some water, you feel unwell and need a second. You can't use it strategically, obviously. You can't be like, well, I just need a minute and then go and think for a bit. But if there's a legitimate reason, comfort break, etc., be aware these will be noted. So if you're doing this every round, the judge is probably going to come and talk to you, and it's going to look suspicious. So use it where you really need to, but the ideal should be that between rounds, and keep in mind how much time is left. Like Brennan said, okay, my match is finished, there's 10 minutes, I'm going to go and do everything I need to do now, and then I'll kind of like stand around and chill out afterwards and just use the time that's available, rather than chill out for a bit and then rush to go to the bathroom and get water, etc.
Yeah, I think that can transition us into sort of during match procedure as well. So just kind of going off that point of asking a judge to use a restroom or something like that, when you do ask him, I recommend you also ask for additional time to compensate for the time that you're gone. Usually they will give it to you, but sometimes you can get a bit shortchanged, or they don't give it to you. Like they could forget. They're people too. So I will, even if I'm on the freaking fastest aggro deck that this game has ever seen, I'm still going to. It's like these things I don't want to think about. I don't make decisions. I just have standard operating procedures when it comes to stuff like this, and like it just gets done, right? Like even if my deck is fast and I see my opponent's deck is fast, I'm still asking for the extra 2-3 minutes while I go to the restroom, just because I just do that every time. And if I do it every time, I will never forget to do it, and it will never be a problem. So going into sort of during match, this is something that this is sort of a skill and just a way of presenting yourself as a player that I know I respect and sort of look up to very, very highly for players that can do this well. And this is just creating a clear game state with how you play your cards, how you place them down, and also how you use your voice, right? How you use your language, and sort of articulate exactly what is going on in the game, progressing through the phases correctly, making your speech and your play clear, right? So, you can see the pitch. There's no cards that are stacked on top of each other. Your combat chain looks all good, et cetera, et cetera. When I play against opponents that do that very well, and they make it extremely clear what is going on, I think everybody has a better time. It's something I respect very, very much, and I've tried to emulate in my play. I do think it is legitimately a skill and a muscle, something you have to work at. But I think that's one of the, funny enough, is like, I actually think that's one of the highest accolades of professional play, is like people that can really, really articulate and make it clear, like what exactly is going on, and professional. I think at the end of the day, like that's the best word for it, is professionalism. I think that, sort of presenting yourself in that way, and presenting the game is just very, very good for both you and your opponent in a successful game of Flesh and Blood.
Avoids issues. And there is this kind of, I've had this discourse before where it's like, well, I should do all the things I'm required to do, but I'm not required to clarify game states for my opponent. I mean, to a degree, that's true. But if if this is your angle shoot, to, get your opponent to forget a trigger or not understand that you have a pitch here, or that this non-attack action is now buried 3 cards deep in your graveyard is still live on the combat chain. I mean the margins that are involved, right, are just so small, and I just don't think that these small margins for even yourself, even if you think this is the right thing to do, which I personally don't, is worth what you're going for here. There's just so many other things that can happen on the back of this. There's so many things that can go wrong in terms of the game state being misunderstood, triggers being forgotten by both sides. It's just not it's not worth it. A clear, clean game state, but to the rules, like in terms of like one that comes up often is like non-attack actions, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, they go to the graveyard afterwards, and you can choose to keep them somewhere if you want to represent or do whatever you want. That's fine, but they still need to be clear. Even if they've gone to the graveyard, it needs to be clear that this card's been played, which is where they should be. But it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that is just a funny part of
the weirdest thing about Flesh and Blood.
Yes, it is. It is very, very weird, and I understand why they go to the graveyard, but they do actively make the game much, much harder to understand. And I think it's a super silly system, but at the same time, I do think it's necessary, and I don't have a better solution for it. But yeah, you'll see 90% of players leave the non-attack actions on the combat chain just because it makes the game state extremely clear. But anyway, I digress. I think if you're able to pull this off effectively, if there is a judge call, it makes it infinitely easier to handle that, right? Because you have been very clear in exactly what is happening, what has happened, and you can simply retrace those steps. And, if you're playing in adherence to the rules, you should have no problem 99% of the time. There might be those outliers, and we'll talk about that I sort of have a bonus section of what it's like to call a judge and what it means to appeal a judge and what that process is like. But the more clear you are, the better off you're going to be if there is a judge call and if there is some confusion.
It covers you. You just make sure you're covered. It's not even about helping your opponent. It's making sure that you are covered, because when you have this conversation with the judge, you can clearly point out, I played this, I said this went to the graveyard, this came in, I announced this card, I announced the trigger when it hit. We clarified that, yes, the crush effect was here. I said, crush effect, close the combat chain, etc. Last thing, I know you want to talk about judging in a bonus section, but just one piece of advice I can give. Any discrepancy, any question, immediately call a judge. Like it's not about you trying to angle shoot. It's not about trying to put pressure on the opponent. You shouldn't decide. It's not up to you. If there's a discrepancy, immediately call a judge. It's the first thing I'll always do, because it just takes out any bias, any kind of like feeling or emotion out of it, because I've just taken the decision out of me and the player trying to decide between us. That shouldn't happen. That's not what it is. It's the judge. It's a judge call. That's what we need. There's a discrepancy on the table. That's what judge is there to solve. So if there's something when my opponent goes, oh, I thought this, then, or a trigger got missed and my opponent doesn't think that the trigger was missed, hand up immediately and just call judge. But we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, and that was actually kind of the last point I had here, was just to not be afraid to call a judge. I think a lot of players are when they enter the game, but you will realize pretty quickly, and we will tell you right now, that it is not taboo and it is actually better. I have all the time, my opponents will ask me sort of basic rules questions, which I could answer sometimes. I mean, people do. People do. Yeah, exactly. People do ask me unusual amount of rules questions, like I know Hayden would tell you that I'm not that guy. Okay. I don't know. But also, even if it's basic and I do know the answer, I call a judge, because if I'm wrong, then I don't know if by the actual rules of the game, if it is my fault, but from what I understand, I think it is. And I don't want to provide my opponent with incorrect information, even if it's like I'm 99% sure, because that 1%, it's really, really bad.
I would just direct them to call the judge themselves. I'd just say, look, if you've got a question about that, I'd probably just call a judge just to clarify. That's what I would say. Just make it nice and easy. At the end of the day, the judge is there to help, not hamper. They are there to support the smooth running of the event. They are the players, not friends, but, so to speak, metaphorically, the friends of the table. They're there to adjudicate and make sure things go as they should. So it's never a bad, I mean, sometimes it's bad in terms of when a judge comes, but it's not bad it's never bad to call a judge. The correct decision is always to call a judge. It's never an incorrect decision to call a judge. That is when things can get murky and go down a bad path, which can, when the judge does eventually come, because things escalate, be very bad for both sides of the table. So just call a judge.
All right, heading on to my favorite section, which is the post-match. Yeah, I think that you need to be humble in victory, but also humble in defeat and humble in victory. So, Hayden, I'm just gonna throw this question immediately to you. What do you think is the appropriate way to treat a loss?
I mean, it's a game. Personally, not to say I haven't had losses where it's tilted me or made me feel bad. I have actually two examples I want to throw on this of like my personal experience on this. But first of all, I do just want to say the way to treat a loss is just that, lost the game. That's fine. It's not made the dynamic between me and the player or my opponent any different. In terms of I'll usually still have a chat afterwards. It's not gonna change things. If things went poorly for some reason, there was something that happened that I didn't agree with because maybe there's discrepancy or something happened between me and my opponent that just left me feeling not very good. Maybe an interaction that I didn't really like. Then I will probably just be polite and just say, "Yep, thank you for the game," and just leave the table and just remove myself from the situation. I've lost two win-and-ins, for one for a calling, one for a PT, that felt both pretty bad. I would say I had kind of like two different experiences of that. My first one, I didn't take it so well. I was not so good when I was at the calling, and I lost my win-and-in. Just the game just didn't go my way, right? There was a lot of like points where variance really hit me and that kind of got to me. So I just removed myself from the table and that's kind of what happened. My winning at the PT, like the game didn't go my way, but I had a pretty good experience despite a judge call that was not a very good experience, but that's fine. And my opponent was really good about it. And we had a conversation afterwards and we pressed out the table for 5 minutes. So it's an attitude thing, I think. And at the end of the day, like I'm there to play the game and have a good experience and yes, to win, but it's not all about just winning.
Yeah. I think that when you're presented with a hard loss, like a top 8 loss or maybe the variance is going your way, and we'll get to that where I think people use it a bit liberally as well. But like, I think you have an opportunity there. Like you have an opportunity to sort of step up and treat it as a learning opportunity, treat it correctly, right? Be gracious in defeat. And I think the more you do that, the better career you're going to have by far. Like it's the hardest thing to do. I think that, as human beings, a lot of us do have a initial adverse reaction to losing, especially when we're very emotionally invested. And I wouldn't say like, it's just a game because for a lot of people, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. It's, there's a lot that goes into that, but you won't get anywhere in life by being salty or being sort of just sour about defeat. All defeats are learning opportunities, right? And I think that the sooner you can, the more you can positively reframe those losses towards that, just the better career you're going to have in Flesh and Blood and the better play experience overall. And I think that this is just like part of, I don't know, being a good person is learning how to treat sort of disappointments, defeats, and setbacks in that way.
Yeah, don't get me wrong in terms of.
I'm not getting you. I'm not getting.
No. I just want to clarify though, because I did just think about it. When I say it's just a game, I guess that's my attitude of like, it's just one game. Not that Flesh and Blood is just a game, because it's not just a game. Like it's so much more, especially to myself and Brendan and a lot of others. But what I mean is that is just a game, just one game that's happened. And, for whatever reason, the loss happened. I misplayed. There was variance. It is what it is. I would definitely be a lot more annoyed if I misplayed as opposed to variance, but that is fine. And like you say, people use the term variance loosely. I just think the main thing is, and the kind of words to live by, is just don't be a dick and just think about what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like it's the person on the other side of the table has very different feelings to you if they've just won a game, right? They're probably feeling elated, they're feeling like they've just won a really important match, whatever it is. And, I've unfortunately heard people belittle those victories, and that's really saddening to hear. And I just think that as a player, win, lose, draw, whatever, you've got to be conscious of the attitude, the demeanor, whatever. If it's not your thing, conversation and friendly banter and whatever is not your thing, that's fine. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but just cool, great match, whatever, or thank you, sign the slip and just leave the table, remove yourself from the situation. It's way worse to say small things or, even a couple of words that could make someone feel really bad about the game as opposed to just leaving the table. So apply it to the sort of person you are, and don't, I'm not saying change your personality, but whatever fits with you. If you're, you're a very serious person, conversation isn't there, you're there just to play the game, that's fine. But, but just be mindful of the way that you act and what you say, and it is going to impact people.
Yeah. just want to draw attention to that point you said, because I think it's really important, and I kind of skipped over it. But yeah, belittling victories is just such a terrible thing to do. And I know, like, you will feel that way, especially when you get really unlucky. Like, wow, if they just didn't get that one thing, it's like, but you just don't say that. Let the person enjoy the victory, and like, that's all you can do is help them facilitate their good moment while you deal with yours and go learn and come back better. So the next one I have, which is going to be really quick, is just how to treat a win, and it's pretty much the exact same way. There's really most people treat wins just fine, but you don't. There's no need to rub in your opponent's face, kind of. I don't know. There's some opponents that will get a bit upset, and you can tell, and it's like, I just let them have their space, have their time, and you know, I don't have a trouble with it, but I think that it comes down to humility, right? Like, you want to be humble in victory.
I've seen some people not be so humble, which is, yeah, I mean, it's win things that, you know, it's a big, you know, it's like a win in for top 8, it's winning an event, like, yeah, you know, it's really hard to control those emotions, and you shouldn't have to, but also, again, someone else on the other side of the table who's feeling the very opposite emotions to what you're feeling. I did just want to say, one big thing about this kind of like how to treat a win and how to treat a loss is like, a big learning for me is that I like to self-reflect a lot in the game moments and post the game, and I had to like check myself a bit, because this is something that I do that I think is not a good habit and I need to get better at. It's like, especially at events like an armory or a skirmish, or just, you know, maybe even like a road to nationals, events that are maybe at the kind of, I guess, I don't want to say low level, but, you know, like at the kind of the not professional level, like the competitive level or the casual level, I'll often find myself like thinking so much about my plays during the thing, trying to, you know, learn and get better, that I actually talk about like my punts and things like this, and get frustrated at myself, which is like not helping the player on the opposite side of the table. And I did this actually the other weekend, and someone locally who is, you know, not, you know, a bit of a friend, a good guy, nice guy. I made a bit of a punt against him, and then I just bemoaned myself for making the punt for so long, and then realized that's not a good experience for him, for me to be talking about this. Just need to move on and get on with it, right?
Yeah.
So just self learning there.
So last one I have is just how to deal with salty players.
Like me.
Yeah, basically you just get up and you walk away after the match. I mean, whatever, right? Like, I just don't really entertain that. Like, I think if you're displaying some kind of verbal tilt to me or some sort of anguish for your loss, like, I've just written you off as like, I have no interest in dealing with you or in any of this situation, because I just think it's not a good thing to do. It's just objectively incorrect every single time, and you need to have enough control of yourself not to do that. And I've slipped up too. Like, I've had some really big matches where I've sat after the match, I've just been like, oh my god, my opponent's like, yeah man, I'm sorry for like, you know, really high rolling you. I'm like, oh, just like, I was like, dude, I can't right now. I was like, I know it's okay, like, I gotta go. But yeah, I mean, I think you just get up and you just kind of walk away and move on to the next match. The one I do want to get onto is like how to deal with verbally abusive players, because I've had to deal with this. I did not employ the action that I will recommend, and that is recommended by the rules and community at large, and that's, you just call a judge. Like, those people are idiots. Don't listen to them. Don't even engage with them. Just call a judge and get away from that person, because fundamentally, I mean, they're just a loser. And yeah, I don't know. It's very, very unlikely, by the way. If you're listening to this, if you're listening to this and you think you're going to go to an event and deal with some people that are going to get angry at you, I think most players will go through their entire TCG career and never have it happen.
Yeah, you probably won't experience it. It's very rare, but it's good to know that if it does happen, the best course of action is just immediately call the judge and just get them involved in the situation and try and remove yourself from the situation, because nothing to do with you. It's all on this person, right? They're doing something that, you know, we just don't want that community, that behavior in the community, right? So how do you get rid of it? I agree on like the salty players front as well, right? It's just it's a case of just being like, yep, thanks, and just walk away and leave them to it. Obviously, you know, they're in a bad headspace in that moment, and that's not up to you to fix that or to help them with that. I mean, you can choose to if you want to give it a go, but often it's just better just to just leave the situation. And just on the flip side of it, try not to be salty, right? It's hard, like, definitely, like, I agree with you. There's times where I'm just like, I don't know if it's salt, it's just like, I don't know if you do this, Brendan, but like my biggest thing is like variance is variance, but like a misplay is like the most tilting thing.
Self-pity, right? Like,
it is. It's like
that's also really
self-immolation. You're like,
people will sit there,
yourself.
Yep, they'll sit there and be like, if I didn't, and they just keep pulling back this one play, and it's like, shut up. It's like, we all know we punted. Yeah, it's like, because like I do this. I mean, I do the same thing. I'm usually doing it internally, but I mean, in testing, I'll just be like, I punted back then. I punted like 5 turns ago, lost me the game. But yeah, I mean,
it's self-reflect. Yeah, it's really good. Like, it's good to, but you know, it's just like how much you do it. Like what I just said before, right? Like I've definitely been guilty of doing it outwardly too much as opposed to just inwardly and just living with it and just moving on with the game. Because I will always move on with the game. It's like, okay, that's happened. I need to find a way to win. But still in my mind, I'm like, fuck, this. And to verbally let my opponent know, it's not relevant. It's just going to make their time worse. So it's something that I know definitely, like, for me is like a piece to work on.
And some people start feeling bad too, which is like,
I know, which is just like, yeah, I don't want that situation.
All right, so on to the bonus section. Hayden, big one here. I want you to condense it as quickly as possible, but we did gloss over it. Just like, what is angle shooting? What does it mean? And and approach this very, very, like, with much brevity as possible. Is like, what should you be looking for, if anything? Okay.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, angle shooting is basically trying to find small margins through generally ambiguity to win, right? So, not declaring a card, stacking a pitch card under a pitch card to make things ambiguous, putting things under something else, or just generally trying to make things ambiguous to get an edge, to get a margin on your opponent is basically what angle shooting is, even to the point of, you might say something that could be misconstrued, or you don't say things in a definite way, so that leaves open to interpretation to the opponent. That's what angle shooting is. There's basically, I think, no room for it in the game.
Yeah.
What to look for is just your opponent just not being clear. When you ask them to clarify, not being clear, being kind of a little bit shady and ambiguous. Some people are just quiet, and that's fine. You'll see that. But, I think once you start to see the signs of it, you can pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and then the one thing I want to say is that I would give most people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that foul play is much less common than you think. And there's some people, like, I just don't understand this type of human being that will talk about, like, potential issues of foul play and, like, everybody's cheating and, like, those people suck. It's so rare. It definitely happens, but it's so rare. And if people are blaming the failure of their macro career off of, like, people cheating them and angle shooting them, it's like, dude, you suck. So yeah, there's a saying that I remember my rugby coach used to use. Is something about, like, the sound, like some hooves sound is like they're usually horses or some, I don't know, something.
You don't really remember it. There's
no.
There's a saying in Texas. Fool me once,
Yeah, something with animals. Foul play is pretty rare, and probably not the reason you're losing. Anyway,
100%. Like, it's just. But the thing is, again, I want to go back to, if you do suspect that something is going on, or you just feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, just call a judge. Honestly, like, never feel bad about calling a judge. If you think something is not quite right, you can call a judge. You also don't have to talk to a judge at the table. You can ask, hey, judge, do you mind if I ask you a question away from the table? Your opponent doesn't need to know what it's about. You never have to ask the question in front of your opponent. You can ask to be taken away from the table and ask the question of the judge, and that's perfectly normal. That's perfectly fine to do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, this goes off that quite well, which is just how to handle judge calls. We did talk a little bit about this during the main sections, but I just want to reiterate, if you're new to competitive events or just events in general, calling a judge is not taboo, and you should do it probably more liberally than you are. At the same time, how to handle judge calls. Some people get really nervous, and like, it's not good. This is why being clear during the match is really important. And then I think you just recount exactly what happened in the most truthful way possible. Please don't be untruthful. It usually doesn't work out in your favor. And yeah, I mean, 99% of the time, it's going to work out fine. And most of these things are just miscommunications anyway.
Yep. Just tell like it is exactly what happened, the facts. No need to add, oh, I think my opponent thought this, or just there's no need to add any kind of like thought or theory around what's happening to the actions. Just exactly what happened. I said this, my opponent did this, my opponent said that I said this, like just the facts. That's all the judge needs. And then the judge will start their investigation and ask the questions that are necessary. But just the facts. And then, yeah, you don't need to be nervous. Like, the judge is there to figure out what has happened. And also, if you are just being completely honest up front and just acting in your normal way, that's going to be the best outcome. When people start to, like, say something that they maybe, they annotate the conversation between their opponent, or they misquote or whatever, that's when things start to happen, where the judge is going to start to put suspicion on. So just say it like it is, tell it like it is, let the judge figure it out, and that's all that really needs to be done. And judges are mostly friendly, In fact, all the judges I know are friendly, so
No need to be nervous too. It's very standard procedure. So if a judge, judges are people too, like we said, if a judge gives you a ruling that
they make mistakes.
you think is incorrect, or maybe you think is incorrect, you can appeal it. And appealing a judge call is not taboo. It does seem very taboo at the beginning. You're like, oh, I'm going to tell this person they're wrong and ask their, be a Karen and ask for their boss or something. No, It's actually really, really common, to be honest. And there's a lot of rules in Flesh and Blood. It's a very complicated game. And I think it's generally understood by the community that it's perfectly reasonable to appeal a judge call if you're not only if you think they're 100% correct, but maybe you're just unsure. You're like, it doesn't really sound right. I want to get a second opinion. Just don't be afraid to go ahead and appeal if you think it's appropriate.
Definitely, and not just for like specific like rulings, for penalties and infractions as well. If you don't agree with what's being passed down in terms of, or you don't understand, or you just want a second opinion, right? Like something just doesn't feel right about that, or the decision that's been made by the judge doesn't reflect what you thought happened in that situation. Like, I said this, my opponent said this, and maybe they side with your opponent, but you in your mind you are stout and know that is not what happened. Appeal it every single time. I had a judge call in my last round of the PT that I didn't agree with the ruling that the judge made. I disagreed entirely with the kind of theory of it. I appealed the judge ruling. Ended up being upheld, which it's fine. I still disagree with it, but I got a second opinion, right? Two judges had conversed and decided this thing, and that's much better and made me feel a lot more at ease than if I hadn't appealed the decision.
Yep, I had that happen in Indianapolis. It was an interaction with Ode to Wrath, Merciful Retribution, and the judges...
Merciful Retribution? Yeah.
Yep. Ode to Wrath, Merciful Retribution, and of course Spectral Shields. It was something about sort of how the triggers would be ordered, how much damage exactly would be taken, and I appealed it, and it was overruled to the correct ruling. But yeah, just don't be afraid to do it. So the last one I have on here is something we've talked about throughout, which is just humility. I think that humility is one of the greatest virtues that you can have as a player, and I also think it's one of the hardest ones to have. It is kind of the what is it? It's more of an example of, I think, strength rather than weakness. And although this is generally understood, just be humble in victory and be humble in defeat. And my sort of sub point here, and slightly off topic of his, but just don't be the I got unlucky guy. Nobody likes that person. Just like, shut up, you lost. Oh. Like, I'll even say that, dude. If Sasha came up to me and he was like, oh, I got unlucky, like, shut up.
The bad beat story, yeah.
Bad beat. Oh my god, that's what
I have one request. If you want to come have a chat with me and Brendan at PT or wherever, or Singapore, please do. Love having conversations with everyone. If it's to tell us a bad beat story, please don't.
That actually does happen.
Sound rude, but honestly, I don't have time for people's bad beat stories. It's like, probably after about 15 seconds, I've tuned out. I'll be honest with you. If it's a bad beat story, if you want to have a legit conversation about anything, life, Flesh and Blood, the meta, the event itself, talk about a specific matchup, awesome, please do. If you're going to start with, oh, you won't believe what just happened last round, I'm probably just already not listening, to be honest. So, and that might sound really rude, but I'm going to be honest.
It's such a meme too, like, because it definitely happened. This is even rare. This happens a lot, and it doesn't even happen with like I don't know, people I don't know. It's like the worst offenders are like the people I'm closer with. They're like friends, my friends. Oh my god, just start this. You're like, oh, they start off with the you won't believe what happened. You're like, oh, here we go.
I gotta go to the bathroom, sorry, bro.
Yeah. That's why we gotta use this. This is gonna be our words. And be like, shut up. just like
very Brendanism. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say is, you said don't be the I got unlucky guy. And if you're like me and you're trying to self-improve a little bit, don't be the I made these chaotic misplays. To just learn from it and just move on. That's what I'm working on. If anyone wants to join me in that, please do. But yeah,
learning from your losses. That's a life lesson right there.
Huge.
All right, Hayden. Well, that concludes Flesh and Blood, Etiquette, Sportsmanship, and sort of just how to behave at the table. If someone can think of a better word, shoot it in the comments. Would love to hear it. Because
we'll change the title quickly.
Yeah, now it's just a soup of words. Anyway, closing out for... Go ahead.
Fun. I just want to say that's a great conversation. I'm glad we did that. Thanks for bringing it to the table, Brennan, because it's really important. I think it's something that's not touched on. I know Josh Scott did an article not long ago about kind of just being prepared for an event, which I would recommend going checking out. We did cover some of those things there, but we also talked about other things. And yeah, it's really important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. So signing off for today, there is going to be no Google review for this week, but I'm sure we're going to have some spicy ones as we get to Europe. Can even come give me that review in person and I will recount the story on the pod. But Hayden, if someone does want to get their review read out by you or myself on this very podcast, how do they do it?
Yeah, don't drop your reviews to us because then we don't get the the 5-star rating on the podcast services. So it's a catch. You can tell us about it. You can tell us, and
I'll settle. I'll settle for a tenner. You just give me a good review and a couple bucks.
That's a joke.
Yeah, it's a joke.
If you want to get your Google review in, please submit them to ratethispodcast.com/Arsenal Pass. It'll direct you to your preferred podcast platform. You can review us there with your you're a Spotify, you're a Apple. I don't even know what Apple's called these days, and I don't know why you'd use it. But if you're that one, if you like to use your Pandora, whatever it is, you can go and find Amazon Music, whatever it is. You can find the link to review us there. It's also just great. It helps us get out to other people, potential people who want to listen to Flesh and Blood content, and helps Arsenal Pass grow. And we really appreciate it. So if you do like what we do, or even if you think we're kind of okay, leave us a review and let us know. If you think we're bad, just don't bother. We don't want the 1-star.
Those you can give us in person.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. You can give us the as my boss likes to call it, constructive feedback. It's always constructive feedback. It's negative. All right, Brendan, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Of course, we will be off by the time this pod is here. We'll be on our way to Asia, to Europe. We'll be in we're not in a house this time. We're in separate apartments, but we will be testing the week of. We will be recording a pod. The next pod you will see will be me and Brendan in Lille recording prior to the Pro Tour, which we're organizing. If you do want to, get on board and follow the sort of action, you can find us both on Twitter at BrendanAPG and at Fian_Dale for myself. YouTube channel, we've got videos up there. We've got a few deck techs that went up recently. Of course, just all our other content, and the pod is up there as well. And big thank you again to our patrons. Otherwise, Brendan, I will see you in a week and a bit. And for everyone else, we'll see you in a week also.
Yep. Cheers, everyone.